Welcome. My name is John Effinger. I'm with working with the Hastings Center for Bioethics, and today's presentation we're going to talk about the trust team. I have been in public health for the last 14 years, and so it's great to have everyone here. And Roger Clark is with me. I'm going to let Roger introduce himself. And today's topic is a project that Roger will get into more detail on, but it's funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and we're looking at how do we develop a measure of trust. And this is an important for all of us. And so, Roger, let me go to you, and if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, we'll get started from there.
Hey, good afternoon, John, and thank you. My name is Roger Clark. I'm a retired pharmaceutical representative who, as a community member, sits on Johns Hopkins Institute for Clinical and Translational Research leadership team. I'm also a member of the Community Research Advisory Council at Johns Hopkins Community Collaboration Corps. Finally, I am a community member committed to helping translate, disseminate, and educate my community on health and the importance of being involved in healthcare research. For this presentation, John, you can cue up that first slide if you would. For this presentation, I want to try to achieve the following objectives. One, describe who we are as the trust team, discuss the purpose and aims of the project. Why is the project important and what's the benefit? And as a community member, why I believe this project is important and why community members need to participate in the study. And at last, I'll have an ask of you, and that ask is for you to participate in the study. So you can go to the next slide, John. All right, what is the trust team? Through a grant from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, the Hastings Center for Bioethics and its institutional community partners around the country have been charged with developing a tool, survey, if you will, to understand organizational trustworthiness in the context of community-engaged research. Led by principal investigators Virginia Brown of the Hastings Center for Bioethics and Phillip Schnarrs at the University of Pittsburgh School of Public Health, this study is the first one to investigate the role of organizational trustworthiness in shaping research engagement and processes and outcomes. And I want to just emphasize that last point, as this being one of the first studies to try to tackle this. I can't tell you how many research meetings I've sat in community engaged research programs that I've sat on, and this whole idea of trust comes up. And it's one that they grapple with. I was just on a call recently with the NIH team on a project that we're working on, and that same topic comes up. So it's always out there present. There's really no great way to measure it. And so that's one of our sole objectives here, is to develop that tool.
And Roger, that's a terrific point to bring up, because I think one of the things that I think we've learned in the PCORI projects that I've been a part of, is there can be trust between a community member and a researcher and other clinicians, but then what happens beyond that? And there's no way to measure it. I mean, even with all of the work that PCORI's put in creating the 6 foundational expectations for partnerships and research, there's not a measure. And I think that listening to, our team, while there are other science of engagement projects that are out there, we really are at that leading edge of trying to create that measurement tool. And I think you bring up a very vital point.
Okay. We'll go to the next slide. Let's just talk a little bit about the study aims. Really, there are 4 aims that we're trying to achieve here, or I should say 3, and then the 4th one is really I think it's going to be one of the most toughest ones. But the first one is to understand the perspectives of diverse patients and other partners, that is clinicians, researchers, and community-based organizations, regarding organizational trustworthiness as it relates to research and how these perspectives have shaped interpersonal trust to improve engagement in research. Number two, we're going to look to develop and assess a new measure of organizational trustworthiness, and that's our challenge here. Third, examine the observational properties of organizational trustworthiness that the new measure identifies. And I told you this fourth one is going to be it's not what I would say a heavy lift, but it's probably not a real easy lift either. And that's to achieve the aims of what we're trying to do here. We need to recruit and retain through the completion of the study 1,035 participants. And that is so critical to us to get that number because that's how our study is powered. So to do that, that means that we're going to probably have to go up and above that number. But more importantly, what we have to be able to do is once we recruit and retrain, we need to retain these folks in the study for the duration. And I'll get a little bit more into what the study is going to entail and in a little bit further in my slides. So what is the focus of the project? The project will focus on 3 stakeholder groups: our partners, who are patients, clinicians, who are non-researchers, and representative of community-based organizations like myself and John regarding their experiences with organizational trust and trustworthiness. Engage through identifying our partner perspectives on organizational trustworthiness and perceived association to relationships building processes and post-engagement trust. Using participatory methods and human-centered design principles to co-develop new measures of organizational trustworthiness. And I'll just go back and I like to just make sure people understand. I know a lot of the researchers in the academic world will understand this, but this human-centered design principles is really principles that have been developed to really look at things from the participant's perspective with humility and empathy. In other words, developing something that is meant for them, for their use. So when you hear that human-centered design, it's not something, out of science fiction. It is something that has been practiced, for a while. And I always like to explain that because I think that the first time I heard about human-centered design in the context of what I've seen us do in the research world as a community member, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I didn't understand what that meant. I heard it in other avenues around, when they're developing cars, but I just never thought about it in the context of what we do or what is being done in research. And the third point I will just say here is assessing the relationship between engagement processes, organizational trustworthiness, and post-engagement trust.
One point on the human-centered design, that certainly aligns with the whole concept of PCORI, which is patient-centered outcomes research. So really glad that you brought that up. Let's go to the next slide. There we go.
So what I'm going to do for a minute before I go to the slide, I'm just going to stop because I think, as I've kind of gone through this, John, I think I've met all of our objectives. And, obviously the first one was who we are as a trust team, discuss the purposes and aims of the project. But what I don't think I really did a good job on is why is this project important and what's the benefit? And then as a community member, why I believe this project is important and why community members need to participate in the study. Well, why is this project important and what's the benefit? We've tackled and wrestled with in the research community, and particularly in the research community that I work out of Johns Hopkins and in Baltimore City, the vestiges of all the things that happened around Henrietta Lacks. And I think it's important, and because of that, there's been a lot of distrust built up over time. And it really had never been effectively addressed because I don't think it never was fully understood what was going on until, I think people in the research area started to try to understand from a community perspective, what was the blockage and what was the barrier. So that's why this project is important, because we really kind of get at the root of why folks are not in these communities, aren't participating in trials, et cetera, and what are the barriers. As a community member, this project is important for a number of different reasons. I think the most important reason I'll lay out from a community member standpoint is the fact that we need to have our voices being heard in these sessions. And I think that's the most critical thing. So you think about it like this. There's an old saying is if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I truly do believe that we have to be at these tables, listening, providing our input so that we can so that one, we have a robust discussion around these topics and making sure that they are germane to what is important as a community. And so I think if I've answered those two things correctly, I think what we can do is kind of go right to this slide here and what I'm going to be asking our participants and partners to do. So if you are a clinician, a patient, and a clinician that's a non-researcher clinician, or a community-based representative, and you have partnered with one of the academic institutions related to the project for community engaged research, we want you to participate in this research, in this survey that we've developed. And I'm just going to talk I want to go back a little bit, spin back a little bit on this survey. There was a lot of work put into this survey over the last year and a half, or I should say over the last 18 months. And during this work, there's many iterations of how we had to develop, how we had to thought through. And because we had both researchers and community members and various other stakeholders at the table having these discussions, we believe we come up with a tool that we will actually be able to accomplish this measurement of trying to measure trustworthiness. So that's the thing. So going back, patients, clinicians, non-researcher clinicians, or community-based representatives can participate and can partner in this program. Here's what we need you to do. We need you to complete a brief qualifying survey. Now, if you meet the criteria as highlighted above, that is, you're a patient, clinician, non-researcher, or community-based partner representative, community-based partner representative, you're going to be able to move forward to the actual to the actual surveys. And those surveys are as follows. The first survey will take approximately 45 minutes. And upon completion, you will receive a $50 e-gift card. About 30 days post the first survey, you'll receive a second survey. It'll be shorter in length. It'll be about 25 minutes. And upon completion of that survey, you'll receive a $25 e-gift card. Again, this is kind of what I'm asking you to do because it's something that we need this information. And I'm speaking now really directly to my community members because I'm going to be talking to you and I'm going to be actually coming to you, asking you to participate in this trial. But more importantly, also to our clinicians, our clinician partners, and our patient partners that are involved. Again, this is what I'm asking you to do. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and
Well,
actually, I'm going to go ahead, John.
before we do that, and recognizing this is going to be on YouTube for an extended period of time, and there are going to be people that may stumble upon this through any number of ways, either the YouTube's algorithm or they hear somebody talking about it, and they have never participated in a research study before, either as a community member or as a community advocacy group. Can you spend a few seconds and talk about why it's important for folks to think about doing this? I mean, you've hit some of those pieces, but for somebody that has never thought about participating, what should they be thinking about? And then we can always point them to the PCORI website. We'll put that in the discussion or in the description, but why should people get involved in this?
Well, people should get involved in this for because I think it's so important to really be able, if we're going to tackle the barriers that we see or perceive on both ends, because there's both ends in terms of this as a community member, but more even as researchers, there are barriers involved. There has to be some behavior changes that have to take place. And let me kind of explain that a little bit to you in this way. If you go to a physician, the physician gives you a diagnosis. He tells you, here's what I want you to do. Okay, you leave there. You got all the intentions to do what happens, but the various things of life impact sometimes your behaviors. And so maybe you don't do what you do. And it's just saying it's not a saying, it's actually from the IOM report back in I want to say it was 2002. It said that 80% of the clinical outcome takes place outside of the clinical setting. It takes place outside of the doctor's office. And so what we got to do is we got to be able to change folks' behaviors. The only way we get at that is that we provide valuable input from both ends of the spectrum. That is from the academic researchers to researchers and from the community. And so if I was to give you any important reason to participate, is because everybody's voice matters in how we do this, how we change the paradigm about how we participate in research, how we access healthcare, et cetera. But more importantly, in communities that have been, let's say, somewhat disenfranchised or don't have access, this is an opportunity to really try to break down some of these barriers. And your voice as a community member is probably the most important voice in this whole discussion, because it's a lot of times it's the voice that is really not understood and not heard in these settings. So I hope I've given you a lot of reasons, and I can go on and on, but it's important for you to participate because we need to have your voice in this endeavor.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised that point. I mean, I'm bumping up on 74 later this year, and yet I'm involved in another patient-centered outcomes research institute, or PCORI project, on suicide intervention for young adults, 18 to 24. And just listening to those young adults in our young adult advisory board and why they think it's important, it's given me really hope going forward. But it's not just, this is from a group that has traditionally also been disenfranchised. But it's not just that generation; it's all the generations between that group and my age group or our age group, and from different kinds of perspectives. And it's not just generational; it's we're all across the country. And we also have folks in the territories that are participating. And so each of these voices add value. And if people are not participating, we don't have the benefit of their experience and their knowledge in what they see happening to them specifically.
Yeah. You're right, John. We have to, in this country here, actually the most advanced, most innovative in healthcare. But when you look at our statistics in terms of outcomes, we fall way short based on where we are in terms of innovation and monies and resources spent towards healthcare. And it really comes down to understanding behavior and making adjustments. And that's what this study really gets at. It's getting at the behavioral component. It's drilling down to that. And I think that's why it's so important for individuals, as you just mentioned here, to really participate and to have every voice from those stakeholder groups that I mentioned early to be involved in this. And so we're going to be pushing hard to make sure that we get those numbers in so that we can really see the validity and tractability of the work that we've done. So, and I'm pretty excited about that.
So our bottom line is, if you haven't participated in the research, you won't be able to take part in this. Start taking part in some of these research projects. And if you have, we need your voice. So I'll go on to the next. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I said absolutely. You can go to the next slide.
There we go.
So there you go. You can actually start now. If you just put your phone on that QR code, you'll come up to the pre-qualifying survey, and it'll actually take you there, and you can try to pre-qualify right at this moment here. And I would ask you to urge you to go ahead and do that. If you're looking at this presentation, do that. And then what will happen is once you've done that pre-qualifier, it's going to tell you right then on the spot, whether you're qualified. And if you are qualified, stay tuned because you'll get a separate email probably within about a 48-hour period that will direct you to the first survey. And so please click on that and go. So John, let's go to the next slide because as an old salesperson, I like to make sure we've kind of closed the deal here. Unless you have a question.
Yeah, one thing I was going to add in there while we have the click here, in the description, if you don't have a phone that can hit that QR code, we're going to have a link to go to the same place. So be sure to follow one of these paths to get there. But there you are. That's your sales piece.
Okay, there you go. So here's what we want you to do. I'm asking you to do this, and I need you to do this, is if you're a patient, clinician, non-researcher, or community representative, have partnered with an academic institution for clinical community engaged research in one of the partner institutions. If you meet the criteria in items 1 and 2, we would like for you to participate in this project by completing the surveys. The surveys will come to you in a separate email with instructions. And like I said, if you qualify, the first survey will come to you within about 48 hours. And equally as important here, or I should say important to you maybe, is the fact that you will be compensated for actually participating in this trial. Because as I indicated to you, for the first survey, you will get a $50 e-gift card. And for completing the second survey, which will come 30 days after the first survey, you'll get a $25 gift card upon completion. So please sign up. If you have any questions, go to the next slide, John. I promise you I'm going to finish off, and here we go. So if you have any questions about what's going on, you have any problems with the survey, you're not sure, you have Armin Dory, you have his email address there, you contact him, and he'll make sure that he puts you on the right path to completing your surveys. Thank you again for your time, John. This has been helpful, I hope, and I'm hoping that we will get 1,035 participants in this study that we're undertaking.
Well, and I think you brought up good points. And what I'm hopeful will happen is that folks, and part of this is you have to have participated in a research study in the last 5 years. But if you have, talk to other community members, talk to other clinician non-researchers or advocacy groups that may not be aware of this. Bring them to this setting, and they can use the same QR code and the same link to get in there. As you mentioned, Roger, this is a lift for us to get to the numbers we need to have the validity that we need. But we know that through the year-long process that we put together, this survey instrument, all the different places, all the different people we talked to, and all the different places that we went, that it is it's unique or very close to it. And the more voices that we can get in there, the more perspectives and learned experiences that we can get in there, the better we're going to be able to prepare future research studies. And that's what one of the outcomes is. So maybe if you could take just a minute and kind of extrapolate beyond, this particular project, what could be one of the impacts that may happen? And particularly since you came out of the pharmaceutical industry for a while, what impact could it have even on the pharmaceutical companies?
Yeah, I think, when you get in, when you have these research endeavors, and I'll speak from, a community perspective. When you're participating and you're involved, a lot of different things, a lot of different avenues open up. New things that you didn't know, become very apparent. One of the big things is just access. When you participate in these research trials at large academic institutions, you're actually having the opportunity to access and be involved with the top clinicians in their respective fields of service, respective fields of study. So I think, to me, that's one of the most important things. To me, to be around that and to have access to that is very, very meaningful. I told you early at the top of this that what was important to me was the fact that we were able to get information, disseminate, translate, and get it out to the community. And I think the way you do that is being involved. So that has broad implications for our community and making our communities helpful. If you're involved, the chances are is that you're going to be able to access these resources. And I think that's what you want. That's actually what the academic institutions or these institutions want. They want you to access. Sometimes it seems like there's this big, there's this roadblock, but there isn't. It's just a matter of trying to understand. Sometimes we talk past or we walk past one another because we just don't understand,
Right.
one another's world. And I think that that's what we're doing here with the trust thing. It has broader implications for all involved. We know that our pharma companies and our pharma folks want to get closer to, obviously they want to get close to the research community because that's where a lot of their primary focus is at clinicians. But more importantly, they want to get close to the community too. And so participating and understanding what this whole issue around trust is, how organizations and how people in the community perceive that is going to have huge benefits down the road because there's always clinical trials. And I will make this last point. So as an African American, it is so vitally important for us to be involved because when you look at clinical trials and you look at what's coming down the pike, or if you look back at what has come down the pike, if you look at our participation in these trials, our participation has not been to where it should be in terms of our numbers in the in society, as well as our numbers in these communities. So it's important for us to really take stock of that and to really be involved because it's important for us to understand how these various interventions work in our communities, work in our bodies, etc. So I'll stop there, John.
Well, what a wonderful way and an important way to close this out. And so, for those of you watching, this is the first in a series of 9 monthly sessions that we're going to do. Each one will have somebody in Roger's place talking about their perspectives. Roger, we want to thank you for being the first and stepping up on this. I know that it's you probably didn't expect that when you put together your slide deck that you were using to help try to recruit people here, but your voice has been an important voice for us to begin starting this. Also want to give folks just a heads up that Virginia Brown has come up with an idea. We're calling it 1 Minute Insight. And we're going to put those up as well. And it's basically going to be a community member or somebody from a community advocacy group or a clinician, non-researcher. And it may be 1 or 2 of those folks. And within a minute or a little over a minute, talk again about why this kind of work is important. And then for the folks that I have worked with through the Texas Health Institute, we have a pretty heavy lift in our numbers. And so as Roger's going to be, contacting folks that he's worked with, I hope to do the same thing and bring in folks. And so with that, Roger, unless you have any other concluding thoughts, this will be a wrap. And really appreciate everybody taking a few minutes to watch this. And thanks to PCORI for funding it, and thanks to the Hastings Center and Virginia and Phillip for putting it together. And any other thoughts, Roger? Otherwise, we will call it a wrap.
I just want to thank everybody, and please get out there and get on those surveys. We need your voice in this discussion. Thanks again, everybody.